My name is Rachel Parker, and I live in a small town near Savannah, Georgia. Just 1 week ago, I buried my 8-year-old son, Andrew. His little white coffin disappeared into the wet ground while the rain soaked through my dress. I could barely stand, my whole body trembling. What shocked me most wasn't the loss itself, but the silence around me. My parents weren't there. My sister Hannah wasn't there. Not even the so-called friends who once filled my house with laughter. Only my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Dolores, held my hand and whispered, "You're not alone." But I was. And what came after that funeral cut me deeper than the grave itself. Before I tell you, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because this story will make you question what family really means. I don't remember why I reached for my phone. Habit, muscle memory, a need to feel anything other than the numb weight inside my chest. My fingers were stiff from the rain and the funeral parlor's air conditioning, but the screen lit up anyway, swallowing my reflection in cold blue light. Instagram opened itself like it always did. I must have tapped the icon without thinking. And the first photo hit me like a slap. Hannah, my little sister with the perfect hair and the perfect teeth, stood in the middle of a ballroom in Atlanta, a lace mini dress hugging her hips, a glittering sash draped across her chest, bride TOB. Behind her, a wall of white roses shimmered under chandeliers the size of my living room. A neon sign spelled out Hannah's last fling in pink cursive, and the floor glowed with a monogrammed H in gold. Couples posed with espresso martinis, and every face was glossy with happiness. Swipe. Another photo. This time, my parents were front and center, the same parents who didn't show up for Andrew's funeral, standing shoulder to shoulder with Hannah and her fiancé, lifting flutes of champagne. My mother's lips were crimson and perfect, the shade she saves for important occasions. My father's hand rested proudly on Hannah's back. He wore the same gray suit he told me was too festive for a funeral when I'd asked him to be a pallbearer. Their smiles were practicing for a magazine cover, wide, painless, full of teeth. Swipe. Video. The ballroom's ceiling rained confetti, and a live band belted out an old hit. The caption read, "When life gives you reasons to celebrate, you celebrate big. Hashtag family over everything." I stared at the hashtag until the letters stopped making sense. Family over everything except, apparently, over a little boy's grave. Comments poured in under each photo, a river of hearts and sparkles, and "So happy for you, babe." I watched the numbers climb and felt my breath shorten. I wanted to throw the phone and grind it under my heel like a cigarette. Instead, I kept swiping. I watched my mother touch the cake knife with my father's hand over hers, like they were renewing vows on the other side of my son's freshly turned earth. A notification slid across the top of the screen, a new message from Mom. For a half second, something small and foolish lifted inside me. Maybe she'd apologized. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she'd realized how obscene it all was. I opened it with the same dread I'd felt every time a doctor cleared his throat. "Rachel, come tomorrow. We need the documents for Andrew's trust. It's important for the whole family." I read it once, then twice, then again, each pass scraping something raw inside me. Not, "How are you holding up?" Not, "We should have been there." Not, "I'm sorry I failed you." Just a calendar item dressed up as concern. My hands started to shake with a heat that felt like fever. Andrew's trust. Stephen had set it up years ago, the only good decision we made in that desperate season when bills outpaced paychecks and we were bargaining with overtime shifts and miracles. I had imagined it holding Andrew's future, braces he'd complain about, summer camps with bug bites and muddy shoes, the private tutor he might need if math turned mean. But I never pictured it being discussed over bubbles and hashtags while the cemetery mud still clung to my shoes. I reread the message until the screen blurred. "Come tomorrow." Tomorrow, when the pillow on the couch still had the shape of the last night I slept beside Andrew's empty bed. "We need the documents. It's important for the whole family." Mrs. Dolores knocked on my door to bring in a borrowed casserole dish I hadn't returned, but I couldn't open my mouth to answer. I sat on the edge of the couch, still in the dress I had worn to bury my child, and the room vibrated slightly. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. Somewhere far away, My mother lifted her glass for another photo. What kind of people, I whispered to the empty room, ask for a dead child's paperwork before the dirt has even settled? The question wasn't for anyone in particular. It was a confession and an accusation and a prayer to the God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Another ping, my mom again. Please confirm. We will have coffee ready. Coffee. The kind she serves in her wedding china when the church ladies visit. I imagined the cups clinking while they talked about Andrew's trust like a budget line, while I sat there trying not to scream. I typed and deleted. Every sentence felt either too small or too explosive. Finally, I put the phone face down on the table and pressed my palms over my eyes until points of light burst behind my lids. The silence of the house settled around me, no cartoons humming from the next room, no little feet thumping down the hallway, no voice asking for one more story. My ex-husband Steven was the kind of man who planned for storms even on clear days. When we first moved into the little ranch house outside Savannah, he insisted on labeling every breaker switch in the fuse box and keeping a hurricane kit by the pantry door. Batteries, bottled water, a radio with a crank. If you're prepared, he would say, tapping the list he'd laminated and stuck to the fridge, you don't have to be afraid. I used to tease him for it, but the truth is I slept easier when I heard the click of him checking locks at night. That habit became a way of talking about love, quiet, practical, never flashy. So when he came home one afternoon with a folder from Michael O'Connor's office and a new seriousness in his eyes, I knew it was the same language, just heavier. He poured coffee for both of us and slid the folder across the kitchen table. If anything happens to me or Andrew, he said, slow and careful, everything will be there to protect you. I laughed at first. Don't be dramatic, Steve, but he didn't laugh. He opened the folder and pointed to the headings: revocable trust, pour-over will, medical directives, guardianship preferences. He walked me through each tab the way he had walked Andrew through building a Lego set, patient, step by step, making sure I could do it with my own hands. The trust, Andrew's trust, was funded with the life insurance he already carried through work and a separate policy he'd bought after that scare with his company layoffs. Total value, $950,000. The numbers made my chest tight. They didn't feel real, like Monopoly money typed on prestigious paper. The trustee, for the time being, was Stephen himself, with me named as successor trustee. If anything happened to him, I would take over. If anything happened to Andrew, the assets would pour over to me directly. There were contingencies and contingencies for those contingencies, a whole tree of if-thens that made my head swim. Michael O'Connor met with us twice. He had a soft way of speaking that made complicated things sound like they could fit in your pocket. He didn't hurry us. He asked about Andrew's needs, present and future, and Stephen looked at me, and we both said school first. Stephen added braces, and I added summer camps, and then I said quietly, just, time. Time was the luxury we never admitted we wanted. The trust documents were drafted to cover everything we could imagine: medical care, therapies if he needed them, tutoring, even travel to visit specialists if, God forbid, something serious ever happened. Stephen had thought of college funds, too, but he felt strange writing out a life Andrew hadn't lived yet. At home, Stephen made a binder, the originals in the fireproof box, copies in plastic sleeves, a USB drive clipped to the inside pocket. He showed me each place twice. He added a sheet with passwords and then changed the passwords and printed it again. He rolled his eyes at himself, then kissed my forehead in that offhand way he had, like punctuation. I know I'm being intense, he said, but this is how I make a plan when I'm worried. When he left for Texas, just for 6 months, Ratch, good money, we need the cushion, he put the binder on the top shelf of the hall closet. He stood there with his hand on the door frame and told me again, like he was reciting a vow, if anything happens to me or Andrew, everything will be there to protect you. I told him to stop saying it. He said it anyway, softer. We argued about how many smoke detectors a 1,200 square foot house needs, and then I drove him to the airport, and Andrew cried because the rental car shuttle was loud and because goodbyes are always bigger than kids can hold. Months slid into their grooves. We FaceTimed at dinner so Andrew could show Steven his school projects and so Steven could nag me about checking the tire pressure. When I filed the second semester paperwork for Andrew's IEP meeting, I used money from the trust's initial funding to hire a specialist to sit with me and translate school speak. The documents were a safety net I could feel under my feet. I didn't have to use it often, but knowing it was there changed the way the tightrope looked. Then Andrew got sick. The first hospital bill hit me, not because of the amount, which was oceanic, but because the zeros attached to words I could pronounce, but didn't understand. The trust paid what insurance wouldn't touch. It paid for the gas to get us to Atlanta twice a week. It paid for the hotel room across from the clinic so I could sleep for 3 hours between tests. It paid for the childcare we needed when treatments ran long and my neighbor couldn't cover, for the gluten-free groceries the dietitian insisted might help, for the tablet Andrew used to watch dinosaur videos when the pain was bad. Every receipt felt like a confession and a victory. We were using the plan as he intended, and it still felt like failure because I could not buy my son a different body. Steven came home from Texas as soon as he could, but not soon enough to erase the months we had lived inside waiting rooms. He was lighter when he hugged Andrew. The oil fields had carved him a little. He didn't say, "I told you so," about any of it. He just started paying attention to the binder again, updating, adding, smoothing the pages like a father adjusting a blanket over a sleeping child. When Andrew died, the money that had been reaching toward him suddenly had nowhere to go but backward, toward me. The lawyer explained it as kindly as he could. The pour-over clause would move everything into my name, as Steven designed it. There was nothing unusual about it, he said. People do this in case the unthinkable happens. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house on autopilot, following streets I could have traced with my eyes closed. Their split-level ranch sat like a sermon on moderation, beige siding, navy shutters, a brass eagle above the door that my father polished twice a year. I parked at the curb instead of the driveway, as if leaving space might make a fast retreat easier. Inside, the foyer mirror caught me before I could look away, swollen eyes, hair scraped into a knot, the funeral black dress replaced with a wrinkled blouse and jeans that hadn't seen an iron in weeks. My mother's voice floated from the living room, bright and tight at the same time. "Rachel? We're in here." My father sat at the end of the sofa nearest the coffee table, elbows planted. My mother perched beside him with her knees together, hands folded, pearls glowing like she had a luncheon's worth of composure hanging around her neck. Hannah occupied the opposite end of the sofa in a cream sweater and white jeans that would have terrified me around a glass of red wine. Her fiancé, Ethan, took the armchair, his ankle resting on his knee, one polished loafer dangling carelessly. On the table, a neat stack of papers waited, with 2 pens crossed on top like a blessing. No one stood to hug me. My mother did gesture toward the tray she'd placed with ceremony. "We thought you might want something," she said. "No, thank you, I'm fine." My voice sounded like someone else's. I sat on the far end of the love seat, the one with the sun-faded cushion, and put my bag at my feet. My father cleared his throat. "We'll keep this simple." He reached for the blue portfolio and opened it with a small flourish. "Your mother and I have been thinking about how best to move forward, given everything." He waited, as if I might thank him for his thoughtfulness. "We have decided that it would be wise to appoint Hannah as the trustee. Sign here and here." He tapped 2 flag tabs. The word wise rattled around my skull. "Appoint Hannah?" I repeated. My gaze fell to the names on the first page, arranged in tidy lines, and my stomach dropped in a way that had nothing to do with gravity. "Why?" My mother leaned forward, face composed into that expression she wears for fundraisers, compassion pressed into perfect shape. "Sweetheart," she began, her tone warm and powdered with pity, "you're too depressed. We're afraid you won't be able to handle it." She reached to touch my knee, then seemed to think better of it, smoothing her skirt instead. "Besides, Hannah's wedding is an important event, and she needs funding. Wouldn't Andrew want his aunt to be happy?" For half a second, I couldn't hear anything but blood. "Handle what?" I asked, though we both knew. "The responsibility," my father supplied. "There are tasks, deadlines, investment decisions. You need bandwidth and clarity, neither of which you have right now." "It's understandable." He slid one of the pens out of its little cross and set it on the edge of the portfolio closest to me, careful not to smudge anything. This is temporary, of course. Once you're back on your feet, we can revisit. Ethan nodded as if attending a quarterly review. It's not a judgment, he added. We just want to make sure things don't fall through the cracks. Hannah didn't look at me at first. She was busy pushing her cuticles back with her thumbnail. It's family, she said finally, still looking at her hands. We're just trying to help. I stared at the coffee in its thin porcelain cup. The gold rim wobbled a little in my vision. We spoke with Pastor Jim, my mother continued, as if that settled something metaphysical. He said grief can make people impulsive. We don't want you to make a mistake you'll regret. She folded her hands again, a small prayer with no God in it. Also, darling, the wedding deposits are due this week. Venues don't hold dates forever, and we're on a timeline. My father lifted a page and folded it neatly back so the signature line showed. Here is the appointment of trustee, he said. Here is the limited power of attorney, so we can sign checks in the interim. He tapped each tab. We can handle the vendors, balance the accounts, keep everything orderly. You won't have to worry. I looked at Hannah then. She had that glow she cultivates for social media. On her wrist sparkled the bracelet I recognized from her engagement photos. She finally met my eyes, and for a second I saw the little girl who cried when her goldfish died, the teenager who swore she'd never be like Mom. Then the look was gone, replaced by something steelier. Rachel, I know it's hard, she said, but this is about the bigger picture. Whose bigger picture? I asked, and the room went still. Ethan shifted in his chair, but kept his voice smooth. Everyone's. Your family's. My father clasped his hands, that old finishing move. The optics matter, too, he said. People notice when a family pulls together. It shows stability. That will be good for you long term. Optics. Stability. Words that had never visited the pediatric oncology ward. So you want me to sign control of Andrew's trust to Hannah? I said, the sentence steady now so you can pay for a wedding? My mother winced delicately. Not just pay for a wedding, she corrected. Manage things wisely so nothing is wasted. There are legitimate expenses, deposits, one-time fees. And happiness is not a frivolous goal. Wouldn't Andrew want his aunt to be happy? She repeated it, slower this time. My mouth opened, then closed. Rachel, my father said, voice low, coaxing. We need to finalize this today. There are timelines. We already lost a week. He said it like a shipping manager discussing delayed freight. Just sign here, he tapped, and here. The pen lay between us like bait. My mother tried again, her voice wrapped in sugar. Honey, you've been through so much. Let us carry this. Take a rest. Let Hannah handle the logistics. You can focus on healing. And it would mean the world to us to keep the wedding on track. Family milestones matter. They bring people together. Finally, I leaned forward, careful not to touch the papers. I asked why, I said, softer than I felt. You told me because I'm depressed, because you're afraid, because of optics and timelines. You told me because Hannah's wedding is important and needs funding. I swallowed. You even told me my dead son would want his aunt to be happy. No one spoke. My father's jaw flexed once, a muscle ticking near his ear. Hannah's eyes flicked to the portfolio, then back to me, cautious now, like I might flip the table. My mother's smile didn't move, but her hands tightened in her lap until the knuckles paled. I sat back. The sunlight shifted through the blinds, striping the papers with bars of shadow that looked, for a moment, like jail. I could feel the whole house leaning toward those two signature lines. I folded my hands to keep them from shaking. I hear you, I said. I understand exactly what you're asking. I slid the first packet free, event proposal, the Grand Magnolia, Atlanta. The estimate total sat in bold at the bottom, $320,000. I flipped slowly, the pages whispering against each other. Cocktail hour with raw bar and signature cocktails named after the bride and groom. A plated 5-course banquet with wine pairings. Late-night sliders passed on silver trays shaped like moons. The dress line item didn't say dress, it said custom couture gown with fittings and rush modifications, a number next to it that made my vision wobble. There was a separate page for entertainment, a 12-piece band, a DJ to keep energy between sets, and a gospel choir for the ceremony because Hannah had once cried hearing them at someone else's wedding. There were charges for a lighting designer, a monogram projected on the dance floor, a flower wall, and 2 photographers plus a content creator to shoot vertical videos for social media. Then, at the very end, a flourish, fireworks display, 10-minute synchronized program. I realized I was holding my breath and forced air in, out. My finger left a small, oily mark on a glossy rendering of the ballroom. Without looking up, I asked it into the paper. Are you seriously going to pay for the wedding with Andrew's money? Hannah's head snapped up, irritation already primed in the set of her mouth. It's family money, she said. Don't be selfish. There it was, clean and sharp enough to nick skin. I put the wedding packet down very carefully, like it might explode. The cover letter was from a mid-sized firm in Atlanta, the kind of place that advertises peace of mind on billboards. Legal opinion regarding reassignment of trustee authority and access to certain funds. The date at the top stopped everything inside me. It wasn't after the funeral. It wasn't even after the final week. It was from the middle of the hospital stretch, the week of the second PICU stay, the week I'd slept upright in a chair and counted Andrew's breaths because the pulse ox kept slipping. I swallowed and kept reading. The memo was neutral in tone, all the empathy ironed out. It laid out scenarios. It discussed incapacity of primary caregiver, expedited appointment of alternate trustee, and interim authority for major expenses. There were highlighted parts, my mother's delicate yellow, my father's aggressive pink. Notes in the margins in my mother's tidy teacher handwriting, ask about deposit deadlines and what constitutes emergency. Near the section about permissible disbursements in the best interest of the beneficiary, someone had underlined wedding. While I was fighting to keep my son in the world, my parents had been downtown asking a stranger how to move his future into a fireworks show. When I opened my eyes, my father had his expression fixed in the way he does for uncomfortable meetings. It lived somewhere between patient and irritated. It's not what you think, he stated. A statement that always means it is exactly what I think. We needed to understand options. A family needs to plan. I slid the memo across the table, the date circled by my own finger. You consulted while Andrew was still alive? We were trying to be proactive, my mother said softly. We saw how tired you were, how overwhelmed. No one was judging you, honey. We were preparing to help. And the wedding, well, that's on a schedule. Venues don't wait. Hannah exhaled loudly. You're making this into some big betrayal. It's not. The trust was always going to help the family. Daddy said so. Stephen didn't expect you to carry this alone. She tapped the fireworks line with a coral-painted nail. And honestly, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. The whole town will be there. It reflects on all of us. I stared at her nail and pictured Stephen's hand on the binder, his finger tracing a paragraph. Ethan cleared his throat. Look, he said, the legal opinion is just due diligence. It's smart to get clarity. He gestured toward the memo pile. If everyone agrees, there's no harm. I turned to the last page of the opinion. There, the conclusion. Reassignment of trustee authority not recommended absent clear, documented incapacity or court order. Use of funds for events not directly connected to the beneficiary's welfare likely to be challenged. Suggestion to proceed with caution and obtain consent of all interested parties. My father had drawn a rectangle around obtain consent and written next to it, Rachel's signature. A sound left me that was equal parts laugh and cough. I set the memo down and positioned the wedding estimate squarely on top so that the fireworks number stared up through the translucent tabs like a dare. The papers made a tidy stack. But the story they told did not. I walked out of my parents' house without taking the coffee, the cookies, or the pen. That night, I barely slept. I sat at the dining table with Stephen's binder open like a map across a battlefield, tracing his tabs, reading his notes until the letters blurred. Around 3 a.m., I put sticky flags on things that felt important. The successor trustee clause, the pour-over provisions, the section that named me in Stephen's own handwriting. I took photos of every page with my phone, then backed the photos up, then emailed them to myself, then to a new address I made on the spot. Paranoid, maybe. But I had learned in the hospital that redundancy was another word for love. In the morning, I drove to Michael O'Connor's office with the binder on the passenger seat. His building downtown was an old brick rectangle with creaky floors. The receptionist knew my name without asking. Stephen had made sure I would never need to introduce myself there with shaking hands. Michael stood when I came in and didn't reach for a hug. He just gestured to a chair and waited while I sat, letting me keep my shards of dignity. "I need protection," I said, before he could ask how I was. The word sounded dramatic even to me, but once it was out, it fit the room. "From my family," I added, because it still felt obscene to name them as the danger. Michael nodded once, not surprised. "Tell me what happened." And I told him about the living room arranged like a boardroom, the blue portfolio, the tabs, the $320,000 estimate for a wedding with fireworks that would echo off other people's happiness. I told him about the legal opinion dated while Andrew was still breathing hospital air. I told him what my mother said about being too depressed, what my father said about optics, what Hannah said about family money. I heard my own voice and recognized the tight, brittle tone I used in the PICO when insisting on the third set of vitals. Michael didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back and opened a drawer with a precise, unhurried motion. He took out a flat archival box. "Stephen left something with me," he said, sliding the lid off. Inside was a rigid envelope, the paper thick and cream-colored, my name in Stephen's careful print across the front. He slit the envelope with a silver opener and handed me the single page inside. I recognized the handwriting instantly. The date in the corner was from 2 weeks before he flew to Texas. The letter was short. "If my son dies, everything will go to Rachel. Under no circumstances should my parents or her sister have access to it." "There's more language in the trust itself to this effect," Michael said gently. But he wanted a plain English statement of intent in his own hand. Juries understand that. Judges do too. He put the archival box lid aside and steepled his fingers. "Your parents will not like that you're the wall between them and the money. People rarely admit greed in court. They translate it. Expect concern. Expect public piety. Expect, perhaps, a petition to have you declared temporarily incompetent." The word landed with a thud. Incompetent. "They'll call it protective," he said. "They may say you're grieving to the point of impaired judgment. They may say you're impulsive, unstable, a danger to yourself or to the estate. It is an ugly strategy, but I've seen it. Prepare evidence that you were the one who took care of your son." I thought of the nights my legs went numb because I refused to sit down while he slept, the calendars filled with clinic appointments. "What counts as evidence?" "Everything," he said. "We build a fence out of facts. Start a list tonight. Clinic records, get copies of every visit, every therapy note, every instruction sheet with your signature on it. Hospital wristbands, discharge summaries, lab slips. The signed HIPAA forms that name you as the point of contact. The MyChart logs showing your messages at 2 a.m. parking receipts, gas receipts, hotel folios from Atlanta, meal receipts where you signed because the cafeteria closed and you postmated soup to the ER. Photos of you with Andrew in the treatment rooms, timestamped. Texts with nurses. Emails with Dr. Salazar about medication dosing. The school's attendance letters noting medical absences and your replies. If you kept a symptom diary, copy it. If you wrote questions for rounds on sticky notes, gather those. If the nurses ever left you a handwritten note, take a photo of it." He paused, watching to make sure I was breathing. I nodded. "Witnesses matter," he continued. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Dolores, you mentioned her. She saw everything," I said, and felt my throat loosen a little. "She brought casseroles. And sat with him when I showered." "Good. I'll draft an affidavit for her. Specific dates, specific tasks, her observations of your competence." "Anyone else?" "The night nurse on 7B, Carol, said I asked better questions than some residents." "Find Carol." "If she can't sign an affidavit, a letter will do." "Also, your boss, if you took leave, your pastor if he visited, the social worker who helped with hotel vouchers, even the pharmacist who saw you pick up meds. These aren't character letters about what a good person you are, they're proofs of function. You are the parent in the trenches." He slid a small digital recorder across the desk. From now on, record every conversation with your family. Georgia is a one-party consent state. Date, time, location. Keep your voice calm. Let them speak. Don't provoke, don't perform. We are not staging anything, we are preserving it. The recorder was smaller than a deck of cards. I turned it over in my hand, thinking of the way my mother's voice syruped when she wanted something. You should also see your primary care doctor, Michael added, and a therapist. Not because you're unstable, but because you're grieving. Get it in the record that you are seeking healthy support and that your judgment is intact. Ask your doctor to note that you are oriented, organized, capable of managing ADLs and finances. Judges are human. They trust clinicians. I nodded again. The nodding felt like bailing a boat with a teacup, but it moved something. Change your locks also, he said quietly. Do not meet them alone. If they text, preserve. If they post, screenshot. Do not reply on social media. Do not let them lure you into the comments. If they show up at your door, do not answer, call me, or call the police if they refuse to leave. You are allowed boundaries even with people who share your last name. I exhaled and it shook. Stephen always said plans make fear smaller, I whispered, not sure if I was speaking to Michael or to the room. And Stephen was right, Michael stated. He took a pen and drew a short checklist on a legal pad, then tore it off and slid it to me. Today, you leave those papers with me. I'll scan and certify everything. You go home and gather what we discussed. Tonight, email me the hospital contacts you remember. Tomorrow morning, we'll send records requests. By the end of the week, I want affidavits drafted. If they try anything, we'll be first, not second. I tucked Stephen's letter back into the archival envelope and held it to my chest for a moment. When I stood, my legs felt steadier than they had in days. Michael walked me to the door but didn't open it for me, which I appreciated. I wanted the handle in my own hand. At the threshold, he said one more thing, the way good lawyers save a final sentence for when it will land. They may try to declare you mentally unstable. Prepare evidence that you were the one who took care of your son. I will, I said. My voice didn't crack. A week later, the doorbell rang at 7:42 a.m., just as I was logging the latest hospital records into a folder labeled evidence. Through the frosted glass, I saw a navy blazer, a clipboard, a neutral expression. I knew before he spoke. He asked my name, verified my birthday, and handed me a thick packet as if it were a takeout order. You've been served, he said, and the words slid into the hallway like cold air. I stood there with my bare feet on the tile, gripping the stack by its belly so I wouldn't drop it. On the first page, my parents' names appeared beside Hannah's, aligned neatly under petition for appointment of guardian and for determination of incapacity. The relief I'd felt after meeting with Michael evaporated like steam off a kettle. They wanted a judge to declare me incompetent. They wanted Hannah appointed as my guardian for my protection and for the proper administration of the estate. I sat at the table and read slowly. Allegation after allegation, nothing subtle, that I had mismanaged funds by recklessly moving money between accounts, I had followed the trust's disbursement rules to the letter, that I had demonstrated impulsive, erratic behavior consistent with nervous breakdowns. I called nurses at 2 a.m. because that's when fevers spike, that I was a potential danger to myself and to the assets. I locked the pills in a safe and learned to speak insurance. They quoted my tears as instability, my persistence as mania, my sleep-deprived questions as threats. Then I saw a familiar name, cinched to a paragraph. Affidavit of Melissa Carter, longtime friend of respondent. My throat tightened so fast it hurt. Melissa had stopped returning texts around the third month of hospital stays, saying it was too heavy to hang out right now. In her statement, she wrote that she had witnessed me yelling at doctors inappropriately, refusing medical advice, escalating situations, and slamming a chart. I remembered the day, not a chart slam, but a firm palm on plastic when a resident tried to discharge Andrew with an oxygen saturation of 89. I had asked for attending oversight. I had used my calm voice. But in their version, I was a spectacle. My phone buzzed, and I almost didn't look. Reflex 1. It was a screenshot from a coworker, Hannah's Instagram. There she was by a window with soft light on her hair, hands folded like a saint in a candle ad. Pray for my sister, the caption read. She is going through a difficult time. We have to protect her. The comments rolled like a parade. You're such a good sister. Sending prayers to your family. Guardianship is love. Be strong for her, sweetie. Blue check marks I'd never met offered hearts and folded hands. A local boutique promised to donate 10% this weekend to mental health awareness in honor of Hannah's bravery. And none of it named me. I scrolled through strangers constructing a narrative I didn't recognize, an echo chamber that turned my grief into their inspirational content. When I refreshed, I saw my mother's comment under the post. Proud of you, darling. Doing the hard thing. My father added a Bible verse. Ethan replied with a flexed bicep emoji and the words, "We got you." I put the phone face down and returned to the packet. In the section titled Pattern of Financial Instability, they cited my temporary deferment on a utility bill from the month I slept every night in Atlanta, as if hardship were proof of incompetence. In erratic conduct, they listed crying in public, talking to herself, and recording conversations without warning. Georgia is one-party consent. Michael had said so. They spun prudence into creepiness. There were footnotes to screenshots of my late-night messages to a nurse. He's coughing blood. Should I wake him for meds? I'm scared. They read like evidence of hysteria when printed in 12-point Times New Roman. They had even dragged my house into it, residents disorganized, with photos of a laundry basket and a line of toy dinosaurs on the windowsill. I felt heat climb my neck, the old animal urge to run. Instead, I opened Michael's checklist and started answering it. Preserve, document, breathe. I photographed every page of the lawsuit on my kitchen counter, my hands visible in the corners to prove chain of custody, each image saved twice. Then I called Michael. He picked up on the second ring, voice steady. When I told him, he didn't gasp. Okay, he said. Bring it in. Today. I can be there in 20 minutes. Good. And Rachel? He waited a beat. Don't look at their social media. I already did. He exhaled softly. Then screenshot and stop. Their PR is not your courtroom. At Michael's office, I handed him the stack. He scanned quickly, setting aside pages with a small, precise flick when they required action. They're using the emergency lane, he said. They want a temporary guardian before a full hearing. Can they do that? If a judge believes there's imminent risk. He tapped the margin where Hannah's lawyer had circled, danger to the estate. We'll file an opposition with exhibits. Your records requests are already returning. We'll stack them higher than their adjectives. I told him about the post. He nodded once. We counter with facts. Affidavit from Mrs. Dolores, from Carol on 7B, from the school counselor. Your therapist's note from yesterday. Your employment file showing you requested FMLA and complied with policy. Bank statements demonstrating rule-following disbursements. A certified copy of Stephen's letter. My mother signed a statement saying I wandered the hospital halls talking to myself. I was praying. He met my eyes. Then we own the prayer. Judges understand prayer. We show you reading dosing instructions at 3 a.m., negotiating prior authorizations, logging vitals. Let them try to call that madness. I nodded, tears finally slipping in a straight line I didn't bother to wipe. They're turning my love into a diagnosis. They're trying, he said. That's not the same thing as succeeding. He slid a tissue box closer without looking at it. This is a fight. It will be ugly. But we have law, paper, and witnesses. And we have his words. He tapped the certified copy of Stephen's note. Leaving the office, I passed a mother soothing a toddler in the lobby. He was clutching a plastic dinosaur, green paint rubbed off one eye. I had to grip the back of a chair until the dizziness passed. Outside, the sun was too bright for how I felt. The world kept going. Cars idled, a truck beeped, a sparrow hopped, stupidly cheerful. Court felt colder than the hospital. I sat at the respondents' table, palms flat, Michael to my left, a stack of binders at attention like soldiers. Across from us, my parents and Hannah arranged themselves with choreographed sadness, Hannah in a pale blouse, my mother in pearls, my father with the same church solemn face he wore at funerals where he'd barely known the deceased. Their lawyer, a man with a perfect haircut and a talent for sounding regretful, stood to speak as if he were delivering a eulogy for my sanity. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here because a once-loving mother has been undone by grief. Our petitioners do not come from greed, they come from concern. Ms. Parker has displayed erratic and dangerous behavior, uncontrolled outbursts at medical staff, reckless movements of funds, obsessive recording of conversations, and a home environment that suggests decompensation. This family is asking not to punish, but to protect." He let the words drift toward the ceiling, then brought them down with a paper shuffle. "We will submit an affidavit from Melissa Carter, a close friend of Ms. Parker, attesting that Rachel yelled at doctors inappropriately, slammed a chart, and refused medical advice." He glanced at me as if to check that I was crumbling on schedule. "We will also show late bill notices, disorganization, and social media evidence of paranoia." I felt my face heat, then cool. I looked at the judge, gray hair swept back, reading glasses low, eyes that had seen worse than this. She nodded for him to proceed. He called my mother first. My mother spoke softly, chin lifted just so. Rachel stopped sleeping. She wandered the hospital halls talking to herself. She would cry in public. We worried she'd hurt herself or misuse Andrew's trust because she was overwhelmed. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue, then folded it neatly, as if even her grief required tidiness. Next came my father, voice steady, a parishioner of respectability. "I love my daughter," he said, "but sometimes love means hard choices. We cannot watch her drown." Hannah's turn. She clasped her hands, practiced humility stamped into the angle of her shoulders. "We're just trying to make sure she's okay," she said. "It's family." Michael's hand touched the edge of my sleeve, a steadying tap. When the lawyer finished his opening parade, Michael stood. No theatrics, just a calm that carried across the room. "Your Honor, before we call witnesses, I'd like to place a few items into evidence." He lifted the first binder. Exhibit A, certified medical records from the Children's Clinic, Memorial Hospital, and the Atlanta Specialty Center. "These are the records of all her visits to the clinic," he said, voice steady. "Rachel didn't miss a single appointment." He handed the thick book to the clerk, then the second. Exhibit B, my chart logs showing nightly messages, dosing clarifications, photo uploads of symptoms, and signed consents naming Miss Parker as the sole point of contact. Exhibit C, school letters regarding excused absences, 504 updates, and therapy notes, each acknowledged by Miss Parker. The stack grew. Exhibit D, hotel invoices and parking receipts for treatment trips, matched to appointment calendars. Exhibit E, bank statements evidencing disbursements compliant with the trust, medical copays, travel for care, temporary child care, and prescriptions. No designer dresses, no venue deposits, no fireworks. The opposing counsel objected argumentative, but the judge overruled. Michael continued. Exhibit F, he said, employment records showing Miss Parker requested and was granted FMLA to care for her child. Exhibit G, affidavit from her primary care physician confirming she is oriented, organized, and capable of managing daily living and finances. Exhibit H, therapist letter noting bereavement therapy attendance, no evidence of impaired judgment. He rested his hand on the last binder. Exhibit I, a certified copy of a handwritten letter by Stephen Parker, the decedent's father. We will address its contents shortly. He called the clinic's charge nurse first. She testified to my presence, my questions, my notes. The lawyer tried to pry. "Isn't it true Miss Parker raised her voice?" "She raised standards," the nurse replied. "She asked for an attending." "That's advocacy, not instability." Then it was Mrs. Dolores. She walked slowly, spine straight, her best Sunday dress too big at the shoulders. When she took the stand, she glanced at me and nodded once, like we were still on her porch sharing pound cake. "Ma'am," Michael said, "how often did you see Miss Parker during her son's illness?" "Daily," she said, voice firm despite its tremor. "I saw her feeding the boy every day, staying up all night at his bedside. I've never seen greater strength." She folded her hands. You can tell when someone's falling apart. She wasn't. She was carrying the weight. Opposing counsel leaned forward. Mrs. Howard, you're fond of Rachel, aren't you? Fondness doesn't make receipts, she said, and the judge's mouth twitched, something like a swallowed smile. Michael called Carol, the night nurse from 7B, by affidavit. She'd moved out of state and appeared by video. She described my midnight questions, the log I kept of vitals, the way I checked the pump against the order because we'd had a dose error the week before. She never yelled, Carol said. She got precise. Then Michael addressed Melissa's affidavit. We don't intend to vilify Ms. Carter. Grief makes bystanders uncomfortable, he said. But her description of a chart slam refers to this. He projected a time-stamped hallway camera still, me, palm flat on the edge of a rolling cart, a resident standing, unsure. A nurse in the corner looking directly at the camera, unalarmed. Followed by, he clicked again, an attending physician signing an order to keep the child overnight. Then he called me briefly. His questions were scaffolding, not traps. Did you ever spend trust funds on non-care items? No. Did you miss any scheduled appointments? No. Did you record conversations with your family? Yes. Why? Because I was advised to preserve evidence if they tried to take control. He let me step down quickly, sparing me the other lawyer's fun. Finally, Michael lifted the archival envelope. He spoke softer now, but the room leaned in. Exhibit I, he said, Stephen Parker's letter, dated 2 weeks before he left for Texas. In his hand. He handed a copy to the judge. If my son dies, everything will go to Rachel. Under no circumstances should my parents or her sister have access to it. The family lawyer moved to object, foundation, hearsay, but Michael was ready. Statement of intent accompanying a will and trust, corroborated by the instruments themselves. It goes to purpose, not just distribution. The judge nodded. Admitted. And one more, Michael said. He set a small device on the table. Your Honor, Georgia is a one-party consent state. Miss Parker recorded a conversation in her parents' living room the day they asked her to sign over the trust. He pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room first, syrup poured over knives. Then my father, firm, managerial. Then Hannah, impatience sharpened to a point. The sentence arrived exactly as it had that day, bright and cold. Rachel, if you don't sign, Hannah's wedding will be ruined. We won't let that happen. I watched the judge's face. A thin wash of color drained. She held up a hand. We'll take a 15-minute recess, she said abruptly, and stood before anyone else did. I sat very still. Across the aisle, Hannah bent toward her lawyer, lips moving fast. My mother stared at the table. My father pinched the bridge of his nose like a man enduring someone else's headache. Michael didn't speak. He slid a bottle of water toward me, and I drank because it was something I could do. When the judge returned, the room reorganized itself around her silence. She removed her glasses, folded them, and spoke without preamble. This court is not in the business of weaponizing grief, she said. The petitioners have asked me to find Ms. Parker incompetent based on tears, advocacy in medical settings, and the administrative chaos that attends any prolonged hospitalization of a child. The record, however, tells a different story, one of diligence, organization, and relentless care. She tapped the stack of binders. The exhibits show no mismanagement of funds. The testimony establishes that Ms. Parker attended every appointment, followed orders, and sought clarification appropriately. The letter from Stephen Parker is clear in its intent. And the recording she paused, breath steady, reveals motives inconsistent with the purported protective purpose of this petition. She looked over her glasses at my parents, at Hannah. The court finds that this action constitutes an abuse of process. The words landed like pebbles in a pond. And the judge continued, voice firm. The petition for guardianship is dismissed with prejudice. Costs are taxed to the petitioners. Additionally, given the coercive tactics evidenced by the recording and the potential for further harassment, the court issues a limited restraining order prohibiting the petitioners from contacting Ms. Parker directly except through counsel for matters strictly related to estate administration. Violation will invite sanctions. Silence, the real kind, fell. Papers no longer rustled. Even the clerk held still. But she wasn't finished. One more thing. This court expects apologies to be made outside its walls. Whether they are is not within my power. But I suggest you consider what you've done. Her gavel sounded smaller than I'd imagined. Or maybe I had grown in the last 15 minutes. We stood. The room shifted back into a hallway of bodies and whispers. Michael placed his hand lightly at the small of my back, not staring, just reminding me that my legs still worked. My mother looked at me once, just once, and I caught a flash of something that wasn't pity or anger. Then it was gone, replaced by the hard shine of a woman calculating exit routes. In the corridor, Mrs. Dolores squeezed my fingers with a strength that surprised me. "I told you," she whispered. "Truth stands up, even when we're tired." I nodded because language felt like too much. Michael turned to me. "We'll formalize the order, then file notice to your bank and the trust administrator, so no one tries anything cute," he said. "Go home. Sleep if you can. Eat something. Let your phone ring." I stepped outside into a bright afternoon that didn't yet know anything had changed. Cars hissed by on wet pavement. A man laughed into his phone. Somewhere, a church bell chimed. I stood there with the court order in my bag and the echo of my family's threats still fading from the walls behind me. After the court order arrived in my email as a stamped PDF, I printed 2 copies, slid one into Stephen's binder, and set the other in a shoebox labeled Keep. The money had always felt like a promise redirected. Now it needed a purpose big enough to hold the love it came from and the life it could no longer serve. The practical work started the same way everything else had, with lists. I wrote down what families need when their child is sick, not the brochure needs, but the midnight ones: gas money to drive to a specialist, a motel room across from the clinic when it's too far to go home, a hot meal that isn't from a vending machine, child care for siblings, a parking pass that doesn't devour a paycheck, a social worker who returns calls, a grant for the one medicine insurance calls experimental, a small scholarship to ease the debt of the young doctor who's trying to change. A protocol she didn't create. I emailed Michael, "How do you build a nonprofit?" He answered in bullet points, then sent a longer note late that night with a subject line that made me cry: "For Andrew." We filed articles of incorporation in March. By April, Andrew Parker Foundation was more than handwriting on a pad. It had a tax ID, a bank account, bylaws, and a 3-person board to start: Michael for law, Dr. Salazar from the clinic for medical guidance, and me for stubbornness and memory. Mrs. Dolores insisted on serving as secretary, a title she wore like a corsage. She kept minutes in neat cursive and brought chocolate cookies to every meeting, even when we held them at my kitchen table among dinosaurs. Our first programs were small and specific. We offered lodging grants, 2 nights in a motel near the hospital, extendable if treatment demanded. We provided fuel cards in $50 increments because that kept people from feeling like they were asking for too much. We started a second opinion fund to cover travel when a parent's gut said, "Try somewhere else." Money came in quiet at first. A check from the pharmacist who used to greet me by name, $100 from a church women's circle, $20 bills tucked into handwritten notes that said, "We lost our boy in 1999. Please help someone in his name." I sold the old couch Andrew had jumped on and put the cash in the donation jar. Hannah's friends never donated publicly, but a few sent small Venmos with heart emojis and the word anonymous, and I took those too. We launched a scholarship in Andrew's name for pediatric residents who wanted to research rare disease protocols. The first recipient, a tired-eyed resident named Priya, came to our meeting after a night shift with a PowerPoint no one asked her to make. She cried when she saw the check, and I cried because she cried, and then we both laughed because Michael slid the box of tissues across the table like a practiced croupier. Later, Priya emailed a photo of a poster session with our foundation's tiny logo in the corner of her slide. The foundation's email filled with stories: a mother whose husband had taken the only car to work while she sat at home with a feverish child and no way to get to urgent care. A grandmother who wrote on lined paper that she had never asked strangers for help and didn't know how. A father who wanted to know if we could cover the difference between what insurance paid and the cost of the good anti-nausea medicine that let his son keep down ice chips. We couldn't say yes to everything, but we said yes to as much as we could, and when we had to say no, we said it like a person, not a policy. We can't pay the whole bill, I wrote once, but we can cover 3 nights of lodging and gas. The mother replied with a photo of her child in a hospital gown giving a thumbs up, a sticker on his hand where the 4 had been. This is Aiden. He says thank you. By fall, the hospital's donor relations director asked to meet. I carried the binder to her office out of habit, but she didn't need proof. She'd seen our checks come through the system. We're renovating the 3rd floor, she said, smoothing a layout with long fingers. There will be a new infusion suite and family lounge. You're already our partner. Would you consider naming the lounge? I blinked at the schematic until the boxes and lines resolved into rooms where children would crunch ice and watch cartoons and not cry for 5 whole minutes. I said yes before I asked how much. We didn't have all of it yet, but we had a lot, and when I told the board, Mrs. Dolores slapped her notebook shut and said, "We'll bake more cookies," which was her way of saying, "Let's raise it." By winter, checks arrived with notes attached. Our child is in remission. Please pay it forward. A woman I didn't know sent $10 with a message that read, "This is all I can do." I wish it were more. It felt like the offertory in a church I wandered into without meaning to. The amounts mattered, but the names mattered more. A year after the hearing, I stood in a hallway I knew too well, wearing a dress that didn't quite fit because I hadn't learned how to dress this new body that was me. A blue curtain had been pulled back to reveal a brushed metal plaque mounted on the wall outside the family lounge. The letters were simple, no flourishes. Andrew Parker Wing. Below, smaller, in loving memory. For comfort, courage, and care. My hands shook the way they had at his graveside, but this time the shaking felt like something pouring out rather than something collapsing in. There were speeches. The chief of pediatrics said nice things in a voice that carried. Michael spoke quietly and made everyone laugh once on purpose. Dr. Salazar told a story about a child who liked to line up the 4 pumps in numerical order. When it was my turn, I kept it short because I didn't trust my voice. We can't fix what shouldn't be broken, I said, but we can hand people better tools while they work. I thanked the nurses by name. I thanked the janitors who saw the mess of love and cleaned around it. I thanked strangers whose checks had carried us over thresholds. After the photo where everyone looks like a donor brochure, I ducked into the lounge to breathe. "Excuse me, are you Rachel?" a voice asked from behind me. I turned. A girl stood there, maybe 9, her head under a soft cap with stars on it, and 4 pulled beside her like an odd friend. She held the hand of a woman who had my kind of eyes after too many nights in plastic chairs. "I'm Ava," the girl said, then nodded toward her mother. "This is my mom." Her mother's mouth trembled and then set. "We got one of your grants," she said. "It paid for the motel and the gas. The doctor we saw because of that changed the protocol." "She's responding." She swallowed. "Your son saved my daughter." The pump beeped. Someone in the hallway laughed too loudly. The fluorescent light hummed. But something inside me rethreaded. Her mom cried and then laughed, and then cried again in the way mothers do when their bodies remember more than their mouths can say. When they left for the infusion room, I sat alone on one of the new chairs and looked through the glass of the plaque, the reflection of people moving past it, the shadow it cast on the wall. Unfortunately, it didn't bring my boy back. It didn't make the world fair. But it carried one mother across one night. I took a breath that went all the way down and thought, this is what his future looks like now, 100 small mercies carrying other children forward. People ask me if I ever forgave my family. The answer is complicated. I let go of my anger so I could keep living. But trust? Trust was shattered forever. Family is important, yes, but morals and boundaries are more important. Love without respect is control. Support without honesty is manipulation. And loyalty without integrity is nothing but betrayal dressed up as duty. My blood betrayed me, but my true family revealed itself through kindness and courage. And now I turn to you. Have you ever been betrayed by those who were supposed to love and protect you? Have you ever had to draw the line with family, even when it broke your heart? Share your own story in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your experiences may help someone else find their strength. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. There are many more stories where truth tears apart illusions, where family is tested, and where the human spirit proves stronger than betrayal.